Vance hadn't even stepped out of the car before she started regretting the decision to book a week at the Alohan Springs Wellness Retreat. Her sneakers hit the gravel driveway as she took in the towering white buildings wrapped in ivy, the scent of lavender thick in the air. It was too perfect. Too curated. She was here to heal, not to be impressed by some overpriced spa's idea of tranquility. But after the panic attacks, after the burnout, after getting fired from her graphic design job thanks to a meltdown in front of a client, she didn't exactly have options. Vance, a smooth voice called from the entrance. She turned to see a woman in white linen pants and a matching tunic approach with a clipboard and a warm smile. "Welcome to Alohan Springs. We're so glad you're here." Kara forced a polite nod. "Thanks, just here to take a break, breathe." "Sleep for 100 years, maybe," the woman chuckled. "You're in the right place. We'll have your bags taken up to your suite. You'll be in the Oak Grove wing, very peaceful. There's a welcome meditation starting in 20 minutes if you'd like to join." Kara's eyes flicked toward the sleek glass building across the courtyard. "I think I'll just wander. Get my bearings." She was halfway through the winding stone path that led to the gardens when she nearly collided with a man. "Whoa, sorry," Kara said, stepping back. The man looked over his shoulder, startled. He was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in black sweatpants and a simple gray t-shirt that clung a bit too well to his chest. His hair was damp like he'd just come from a steam room, and his jaw was covered in a few days of stubble. "No harm done," he said, his voice deep and casual. Then his eyes landed on her. "Are you new?" "Just got here," he gave her a once-over, not rude, just curious. "Welcome to paradise. The smoothies are weird, but the views are good." Kara laughed before she could stop herself. "Good to know," he offered his hand. "Dante Lowell." Her fingers curled into his automatically. His palm was warm, his shake firm. Vance. His gaze lingered for a beat longer than necessary. "You here for the yoga, the juice cleanse, or the breakdown?" She blinked. "Excuse me," he grinned. "That's the usual trifecta." "I'm here for the third one, so if you're in that club, welcome." Kara exhaled a surprised laugh. "Wow, way to call me out. Just being honest." He looked toward the forest trail that disappeared into the trees. "Want to walk?" She hesitated. She'd promised herself this trip was going to be about solitude, silence, stillness. But there was something about him, something grounded and real in a place that felt too curated to be real. "Sure," she said. "Why not?" The forest was quiet except for the crunch of leaves underfoot and the distant sound of water from a nearby stream. They walked in silence for a while and it felt surprisingly easy. "So, Vance," Dante said, hands in his pockets. "What broke you?" She nearly tripped on a root. "Wow, you don't pull punches." "I'm not good at small talk," Kara inhaled through her nose. "I had a panic attack in the middle of a meeting with a client. Couldn't breathe, couldn't talk, just froze. I got fired a week later. No one helped. My boss told me to take a walk around the block." Dante's jaw tensed. "What a guy. What about you?" she asked, glancing over. "What broke you?" He was quiet for a few steps. "Divorce, burnout, couldn't sleep for weeks. My assistant finally booked this place and told me if I didn't go, she'd quit." Kara raised an eyebrow. "Must be nice having an assistant," he shrugged. "It helps when you run a company." She turned, half suspicious. "What kind of company?" He hesitated. "Tech, startups." "Investment stuff. So, you're rich," he chuckled. "That's what the internet says." She stared at him. "Wait, what's your last name again?" "Lowell." Kara stopped in her tracks. "Dante Lowell, as in founder of Lowell Innovations. You're a billionaire," he sighed. "And I was hoping I could go one day here without someone Googling me." "I didn't Google you. I just read Forbes." "You read Forbes?" She crossed her arms. "You're judging me for being informed." He raised his hands in surrender. "Touché." They reached a small clearing where two wooden benches faced the mountains. Dante sat on one, stretching out his long legs. "I'm guessing you didn't come here to get starstruck." "I came here to figure out how to not cry when someone asks me for edits on a logo." He laughed. "That's fair." She sat beside him. The late afternoon sun was warm on her skin, and for the first time in weeks she felt herself exhale all the way. "You don't act like a billionaire," she said softly. "That's because I'm tired." She looked over. He wasn't joking. There were dark circles under his eyes, a tension in his shoulders that hadn't left even when he smiled. "I thought money made everything easier. It makes some things louder," he said, "but it doesn't fix what's in your head." They sat in silence for a while. It was the kind of quiet that didn't need filling. When they finally walked back to the main lodge, the sun was setting over the mountains, casting golden light across the grounds. Kara felt something strange stir in her chest. Hope, maybe. As they reached the front steps, Dante turned to her. "You eat dinner alone, or is that against wellness rules?" She smiled. "I haven't read the handbook," he grinned. "Then let's break the rules." That night, they sat across from each other in the retreat's candlelit dining room, eating grilled salmon and sipping herbal tea like old friends. Kara caught herself laughing more than once. She hadn't laughed like that in months, and when he walked her to her suite afterward, Dante paused outside her door. "I'm glad you bumped into me," he said. "Me too," she whispered. He didn't kiss her. He didn't lean in. He just looked at her like he saw something she hadn't shown anyone in a long time. And for the first time in what felt like forever, Kara went to bed with her heart beating a little too fast for all the right reasons. The next morning, Kara woke to birdsong and sunlight trickling through gauzy curtains. For a full minute, she forgot where she was. There were no alarms, no emails, no looming deadlines, only the quiet hum of wind moving through trees and the distant murmur of water. Then she remembered the conversation on the trail, the dinner, the way Dante had looked at her like he was trying to understand something even she hadn't figured out yet. She dressed quickly in a pair of soft leggings and a long-sleeved top, tying her hair into a loose knot before heading toward the breakfast terrace. It was early, but she didn't want to miss the solitude. She wasn't ready to see him again, yet not until she could understand why her stomach was doing flips just thinking about him. But he was already there, seated at a corner table, a single hand cradling a ceramic cup. He glanced up from a leather-bound notebook when she approached. A pen was tucked behind his ear, his brows lifted slightly, not surprised, not expectant, just aware. "You're up early," she said, easing into the seat across from him. "This place doesn't let you sleep in," he replied. "Windows don't even have blackout curtains." "I take it you survived the night." "Barely. I kept waking up expecting to hear sirens or a neighbor's dog. You'll get used to the silence." She noticed he'd written something in the notebook before she arrived. The pages were covered in looping script, some lines underlined, others crossed out entirely. "What are you working on?" "Trying to write a letter," he said, closing the notebook. "Nothing important," she tilted her head. "You bring business here, it's not for business." "It's personal," he studied her. "Do you ever write things down?" "I make lists," she said. "Groceries, appointments, things I forgot to do yesterday. Never thoughts. Too messy." He nodded. "That's the point." A server brought over a tray of fresh fruit, warm oats with honey, and a pot of mint tea. Kara reached for a slice of orange, her fingers brushing his as he did the same. The contact was brief, but it sent a quiet jolt up her arm. "I looked you up last night," Kara said, keeping her voice low. "I figured. Not because I wanted to, curiosity just happened." He waited, no defensiveness in his expression. "You're not just rich," she said. "You've built companies from scratch, you've bought out others. There's an article that called you the reluctant king of tech." "I hate that title." "I figured you might, but it's not inaccurate." He leaned back in his chair, arms crossing loosely. "It's not the money that weighs the most, it's the pressure. Everyone wants something, no one's ever just around without an agenda." "I'm not here to pitch you a startup." His eyes softened. "I know." Their breakfast stretched into an unhurried hour filled with pauses that didn't feel awkward and glances that lingered longer than they should have. When he stood to go, he hesitated. "There's a sound bath at noon," he said. "Apparently it's supposed to realign your energy or something." "You going?" "I was told I should, by someone who thinks I'm too tightly wired." Kara arched an eyebrow. Are they wrong? He laughed under his breath. Not entirely. She looked down at her tea, considering. Fine, I'll go. But if someone tries to wave a tuning fork over my head, I'm leaving. I'll sit between you and the forks, he said. They met again beneath the glass dome at the center of the retreat, where mats were arranged in a circle on the polished wooden floor. Soft chimes echoed through the space as people began to settle in. Kara found a spot near the edge, only to see Dante drop down beside her with a pillow tucked behind his back. "You're late," she whispered. "I had to talk myself into it." The session began with a deep, resonant gong that vibrated through her chest. Kara closed her eyes, trying to surrender to the sound. But her awareness kept drifting to the rise and fall of Dante's breath beside her, the way his hand rested loosely on his knee, his stillness. He wasn't fidgeting. He wasn't checking a watch. He was just there. When the session ended, she sat up slowly, blinking against the light. "Did it realign anything?" she asked. "I think my spine's more confused than aligned," he muttered. "But I didn't hate it." They left the dome together, walking toward the koi pond near the West Gardens. It was quieter there, the crowd dispersing toward lunch or massages or wherever people went when they weren't trying to dodge the weight of their own thoughts. "I used to think breaks were a waste of time," he said, watching the fish drift beneath the surface. "I thought if I stopped moving, everything would fall apart. And now, I think I was terrified of what I'd hear in the silence." She sank onto the stone bench beside him, drawing her knees up slightly. "I get that," he turned to her. "What do you want to do, not just survive? Not just make it through the week, I mean really." Kara looked out at the water, the reflection of clouds shifting with the ripple of fins. "I want to design things that matter, not just logos for companies I don't believe in. I want to build something that makes people feel something. I don't know what that looks like yet, but I know what it doesn't. That's a start." She glanced at him. "What about you?" "I want to stop building things just because I can. I want to build something because I care again." For a moment, the air between them thickened with unsaid things. Then he stood. "I'm going for a swim in the cold plunge pool. Apparently it shocks your body into clarity." She raised a brow. "That sounds like a terrible idea. Want to come see me suffer? I wouldn't miss it." They walked side by side down the path toward the secluded spa wing. The sun had climbed higher, and the scent of eucalyptus drifted through the air. Kara felt a strange ease settle over her, not comfort. Not yet, but a sense that maybe, just maybe, the pieces of her life weren't as broken as they'd seemed. And beside her, Dante Lowell, billionaire retreat guest with tired eyes and a guarded soul, was beginning to feel less like a stranger and more like a mirror. The water was ice. Kara stood at the edge of the plunge pool, toes curled over the stone lip, watching Dante lower himself into the bone-cold water without flinching. His jaw tightened, but he didn't make a sound. Steam rose in thin curls from his body as the chill wrapped around him. "You're insane," she said flatly. He looked up, water dripping from his hair. "That's been established. I'm not doing that. You watched me suffer. That was the deal." She folded her arms. "I didn't think you'd actually go through with it. It's kind of the point of being here, isn't it?" He leaned against the edge of the pool, his forearms braced against the stone. "Get uncomfortable, reset your nervous system, realize you can survive things that feel unbearable." Kara frowned. "You're starting to sound like one of the wellness coaches." He let out a low breath. "I've been here 2 weeks. Either I adapt or I lose my mind." She crouched beside the pool, careful not to slip. "You've really been here that long?" I extended my stay twice. His eyes flicked to hers. "I didn't realize how wrecked I was until I stopped pretending I wasn't." Kara didn't answer right away. A breeze tugged at her sleeves. The trees rustled above them, and somewhere nearby, wind chimes rang gently. "I was dating someone," she said finally, voice low, "before everything fell apart. He told me I was too intense, that I felt everything too much. I started second-guessing every instinct I had." Dante's brow furrowed. "Is that why you had the panic attack?" It didn't help. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he spoke, his voice steady. I married someone who loved the idea of me more than the reality. She liked the headlines, the dinners with investors. But when I stopped chasing the next acquisition, she stopped looking me in the eye. Kara's fingers traced the stone beside her. Did she leave? I asked her to. She glanced at him sharply. She wasn't cruel, he added. We just stopped recognizing each other. I kept trying to fix the business. She kept trying to fix me. Kara stood slowly, brushing her hands on her thighs. I think we tell ourselves we're broken when really, we're just exhausted. He climbed out of the pool, water rolling down his chest in rivulets. She looked away too quickly, focusing on a patch of moss on the stone. He wrapped a towel around his waist and didn't say anything about the flush in her cheeks. They walked from the spa wing in silence, shoes crunching softly along the gravel path that wound toward the art studio. Kara had noticed it on her first day but hadn't dared go inside. Something about putting her hands to work again felt too raw. Dante gestured toward the open barn-like structure. Ever thrown clay before? She blinked. Are you joking? He pushed open the door. No, but the instructor said it's good for stress. And apparently I grip my jaw like I'm preparing for war. Inside, the air smelled faintly of wet earth and citrus cleaner. A few others were already seated at pottery wheels, hands coated in beige slip. At the back, a woman in overalls waved them in with a gentle nod. Kara hesitated beside a wheel. I don't know what I'm doing. That's the point, Dante said, rolling up his sleeves. Neither do I. He sat beside her, his hands already smoothing over the lump of clay on the spinning wheel. Kara watched him for a moment, then pressed her own palms into the damp mound in front of her. The wheel spun. The clay pushed back. Her fingers slipped once, then steadied. You're not bad at this, Dante said, glancing over. I haven't made anything yet. You're still here. She shot him a look. You have a really annoying habit of turning everything into a metaphor. Occupational hazard. They worked in silence for a while, the rhythmic hum of the wheels filling the space. Kara's pot began to take shape, lopsided but undeniably hers. Dante's was taller, more structured but oddly elegant. When the session ended, the instructor helped them transfer their pieces to a drying rack. Not bad for your first try, the woman said, nodding at Kara's pot. I was aiming for a cup, she replied. The instructor smiled. Sometimes what you end up with is better than what you planned. Outside, the sun dipped lower in the sky. Kara rubbed her hands on a towel, bits of dried clay flaking off her fingers. Thank you, she said softly. Dante tilted his head. For what? For not treating me like I'm fragile. You're not. That night, she found a small gift on the bench outside her suite, a sketchpad wrapped in brown paper, a handwritten note tucked beneath the string. You said you wanted to make something that matters. Thought this might help. She traced her fingers over the cover, heart thudding. The next morning, she found him standing outside the greenhouse, hands tucked into his pockets. That was thoughtful, she said by way of greeting. You mentioned lists. I figured you needed better paper. She studied him. His eyes were clearer today, not bright exactly, but less clouded. I want to show you something, she said. After lunch. He gave a slow nod. I'm all yours. They met by the wildflower field on the edge of the property, where a narrow trail cut through the trees and into a clearing she'd found on her second evening. She hadn't told anyone about it, not even the staff. When they reached it, Dante stopped short. The clearing held a single wooden bench facing a ridge of mountains. Tall grasses swayed around it, dotted with lavender and deep purple blooms. The view was staggering, untouched, endless, real. This is the first place I felt like I could breathe, she said quietly. He didn't speak. He just sat beside her, shoulder brushing hers, eyes on the horizon. I think I was scared to stop, she continued. Because if I did, I'd have to admit I didn't like where I was going. He turned to her. So don't go back, she blinked. To New York, to everything that made you feel small. Kara stared ahead, the wind lifting strands of her hair. I don't have a plan, she said. You don't need one yet. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded paper. It was a sketch, her sketch. The pot she'd made that morning, drawn in quick, clean lines. You kept it. I thought it deserved remembering. Kara's chest ached in the strangest, most unfamiliar way, and when he leaned in, slow like he was giving her every chance to pull away, she didn't. Their lips met, not in fire or frenzy, but in something quiet and certain, like two people recognizing the same note in a song they hadn't known they loved. When they parted, neither spoke. There was nothing that needed saying. Not yet. Kara didn't sleep much that night, but for once it wasn't because of anxiety. Her body was still, her mind wide awake. Every time she closed her eyes, her thoughts returned to the kiss. The weight of his hand gently steadying her jaw, the way he pulled back just slightly before he let go, like he didn't want to but knew she needed space. She didn't feel tangled anymore. She felt poised at the edge of something unfamiliar but not frightening. By morning, the clouds had rolled in low over the hills, casting a silvery glow across the retreat. She pulled on a thick cardigan and headed down the path toward the greenhouse, unsure if Dante would be there, but hoping he was. Not at the door this time, but inside, crouched near a row of potted lemon trees, gently adjusting a vine that had tipped too far toward the glass. His back was to her, but he must have sensed her presence. He straightened and turned, his eyes finding hers instantly. "I was hoping you'd come," he said, brushing potting soil from his fingers. "I wasn't sure if I should. You kissed me back." "I did," she said, "but everything else is still a mess." He stepped closer, but not too close. "That's the part I like," she narrowed her eyes. "You like the mess. I like that you're not pretending you're not in it." She folded her arms. "You know, for someone who built a tech empire, you're surprisingly good at talking like a poet." "I blame the eucalyptus," he said, nodding toward a nearby plant. "It's messing with my identity." Kara gave a faint laugh, but it faded quickly. "This ends in a few days, the retreat, us being here. What happens after?" Dante studied her, the lines around his mouth deepening. "I've been thinking about that." She waited. "I don't want this to be a retreat thing," he continued. "I want to see what this looks like when we're not surrounded by herbal tea and midlife crises. You live in San Francisco. I work in San Francisco. I live wherever I want." She tilted her head. "That must be nice." "It's lonely," he said. Until now, Kara's throat tightened. "I'm not a project, I know. I'm not ready for someone to fix me." "I don't want to fix you." He stepped forward. "I want to be where you are while you figure things out." She hesitated, emotions tugging at her in 100 directions. "Don't make promises because of a mountain view and a few quiet mornings." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. "I was going to give you this after the week ended, but I think it's better now." She unfolded it. It was a letter. Handwritten, the ink slightly smudged in one corner. "I didn't read your lists," he said quickly. "But I wrote one of my own." Her eyes flicked over the first lines. "Things I didn't know I needed until I met you. Someone who sees every detail and still doesn't look away, a reason to stop running, a place to rest that isn't made of walls." She folded it carefully and looked up at him. "You wrote this before we kissed." "I started it the day we made pottery," he said. "Finished it last night." Kara's voice dropped. "You're serious about this?" "I don't do things halfway anymore." She reached for his hand slowly, like testing a current. "I don't know how to be in something that's real, not without questioning every second." "Then question it beside me. We'll figure it out." For the rest of the morning, they wandered the perimeter of the retreat together, not speaking much, just moving in step. Every now and then, he'd glance over at her like he was still making sure she was real. It made her feel weightless and grounded all at once. That afternoon, the retreat hosted an outdoor gathering on the west lawn. String lights swayed above the long tables, and soft music drifted from a small group of musicians under the trees. Kara hadn't planned to go, but Dante insisted. He showed up at her door wearing a deep navy button-down and jeans, hair still damp from a quick shower. When she opened the door, he looked at her like he'd forgotten how to blink. "You look like you're already somewhere better," she smiled. "That's new." He took her hand as they walked down the gravel path, thumb brushing over her knuckles like a rhythm he didn't want to lose. At the lawn, Staff passed around sparkling elderflower spritzers and fresh baked flatbreads. Kara and Dante found a spot at the far end of one of the tables, where the view overlooked the valley. She noticed heads turning, whispers drifting. Not everyone had missed the way they'd been circling one another all week. She leaned in. Are people staring because they know who you are? He didn't look away from her. Or maybe because you're the most beautiful person here. Kara rolled her eyes but couldn't stop the heat rising in her cheeks. You're really leaning into this charming thing. I'm not trying. That's the difference. Later, as twilight settled and the music slowed, Dante stood and extended a hand. Dance with me. I don't know if I remember how. Then we'll learn together. They moved slowly, his hand firm at her waist, her fingers resting just above his collarbone. There were no steps, no beat to follow, just the soft sway of bodies and the hum of something deeply earned. When the song ended, he didn't let go. I've been thinking about your work, he said quietly. My failed career? No, his eyes met hers. Your future one. I have a foundation that funds creative startups. Zero pitch decks, just people with vision. I want to back you. Kara stiffened. Is this where you throw money at me and hope I fall in love? No, this is where I tell you I believe in what you haven't built yet. She stepped back slightly. I can't accept charity. It's not charity, it's a partnership, but only if you want it. She looked at him, truly looked. There was no trace of ego, no expectation, just quiet certainty. Ask me again in a month, she said, when I've had time to make something. Even if it's terrible, he nodded. Deal. The next morning, Dante didn't meet her at breakfast. Instead, there was an envelope waiting on her table with her name written in his unmistakable handwriting. Inside was a plain ticket. One way. To the same city where she'd always dreamed of setting up her own design studio. And a note, whenever you're ready, I'll be there. Not to rescue you, just to remind you what you're capable of. 6 weeks later, she walked into a small, sunlit space above a bookstore in a quiet neighborhood. Her name was on the lease, her sketches were on the wall, her hands were steady. And when Dante showed up with coffee and a crooked smile, she didn't hesitate. She crossed the room, wrapped her arms around his neck, and whispered, I'm ready now. He kissed her like he believed her. Because he did. Kara stood in front of the tall, glass-paned windows of her new studio, watching the morning light stretch across the hardwood floors like a silent blessing. The space still smelled faintly of fresh paint, eucalyptus from the diffuser Dante had brought over, and the unmistakable scent of possibility. Shelves of sketchbooks lined one wall, and the desk by the window was covered in swatches, ink pens, and prototypes of her first branded stationery line. She grabbed the coffee he'd left at the door, hazelnut, exactly how she liked it, and took a long sip before flipping the sign to open. It wasn't for customers, not yet, it was for her. A promise. The bell above the door chimed not 10 minutes later, and she didn't need to turn around to know it was him. You're early, she said, adjusting the angle of a framed concept board. I like watching you work when you don't know I'm watching, Dante said, pulling off his jacket and hanging it neatly on the hook by the door. You're in your zone, you forget the rest of the world. She glanced over her shoulder. You're not supposed to say things like that before I've had breakfast. He walked toward her, casual in a crisp white shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows. Then I'll keep the rest to myself until you've had something with carbs in it. Good plan. He stopped beside her, his gaze landing on the new packaging mock-ups laid out across the table. You finished these already? I couldn't sleep. The color theory wasn't working with the last batch, so I switched the base palette to softened clay and burnt cream. They feel warmer now. They feel like you, he said, picking up one of the sample boxes and turning it in his hands. Understated, intentionally imperfect. But impossible to ignore. She leaned her hip against the table. You're not trying to charm your way into a rebrand deal, are you? I'm trying to charm my way into lunch. You could have just asked. I didn't want to risk a no, Kara smiled. You never risk a no. You calculate every move. I used to, he said. Now I just show up where I want to be. He placed the box down and looked at her with an expression that was quieter than admiration but deeper than affection. It was something else. Something that had grown steadily over weeks of late-night design debates, shared dinners on the floor of her apartment, and mornings spent in bookstores where he'd pretend not to watch her sketch. She walked past him, brushing his hand with her fingertips. "Let me finish up here. Then I'll let you buy me something overpriced and covered in truffle oil." He caught her hand before she could pull away. "I don't want to wait until lunch to say this." She went still. "I've been in love with you since you told me you wanted to build something that made people feel," he said, stepping in closer. "Because you do that, every day, just by being exactly who you are." Kara's breath caught. "You're sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything." She studied him carefully, the lines of his face, the steadiness in his voice. "I'm still figuring myself out." "Good," he said, "because I want to help you do it. Every day. For as long as you'll let me." The silence that settled wasn't empty. It was full of everything they didn't need to say anymore. She nodded slowly. "Then let's stop wasting time." He kissed her, right there, beside her work table, the morning sun catching the edge of the window pane as if the universe itself had been waiting for them to catch up. Later that evening, they hosted a small event in the studio. Just a dozen people friends, a few curious neighbors, and one former professor Kara had admired in college who now stood in front of her latest collection with glassy eyes. "These pieces speak," the woman said quietly. "Not just of design, but of emotion, story." "You found something?" Kara looked over at Dante, who was engaged in a quiet conversation near the back wall, a drink in one hand, the other tucked into his pocket. He caught her eye and gave a slight nod, not asking, not prompting, just present. "I think I finally stopped looking for someone to give me permission," Kara said, "and started listening to myself." That night, after everyone had gone and the space was dim with only the warm overhead lights humming gently above them, Kara curled up on the couch in the corner of the studio with her head in Dante's lap. "You're quiet," he said, brushing her hair from her forehead. "I'm not used to this feeling." "What feeling?" "Peace." He kissed the tip of her nose. "Get used to it." She tilted her head to look up at him. "You still have a company to run, already delegated half of it. The board thinks I'm semi-retired. I've spent too many years chasing everything. I'd rather build one thing that matters." She smiled lazily, eyes closing. "What's that?" He didn't hesitate. "Us." Over the next few months they found a rhythm. Not the kind that came from routine, but the kind that came from trust. Dante worked with her on launching the brand, not as a figurehead or investor, but as a partner. He handled logistics, she created. They debated over fonts, packaging materials, and launch events. It was chaotic. It was intimate. It was theirs. They converted the small apartment above the studio into a home. Not because it was convenient, but because every time Kara stepped into that building, she remembered who she became the moment she stopped running from herself. One spring morning, while they were sipping coffee on the tiny balcony overlooking the street below, Dante pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. Kara blinked. "That's not what I think it is." "It is," he said, opening it to reveal a delicate vintage-inspired ring with a band of twisted gold. "But I'm not asking for a wedding tomorrow. I'm asking for forever, however you want it." She stared at him, heart thudding, the city slowly waking up behind them. "I want it messy," she said. "I want it loud sometimes, I want it honest, and I want it with you." He slid the ring onto her finger. "I'll take all of it." Years later, the studio expanded. A second location opened, this time in a lakeside town they loved. Kara's designs were featured in national editorials, and Dante, now happily distant from the headlines, taught occasional workshops for young entrepreneurs who didn't want to lose themselves in the noise. But every evening, no matter where they were, they returned to the same thing. A quiet meal, shared laughter, plans whispered across a blanket, and the kind of love that didn't need grand declarations because it was in every glance, every touch, every choice to stay. They never looked back. They didn't need to. because the life they built was already everything they never knew they needed.